He's posted on Instagram early this morning the following: I want to address the continuing misinformation about my activities and attendance at events in December in the lead up to my positive PCR COVID test result. I've tried very hard to ensure the safety of everyone and my compliance with testing obligations. He says he took a PCR out of caution after attending a basketball game in Belgrade where people tested positive, but was without symptoms. He still tested negative on lateral flow tests. This statement goes on and on. He admits he attended an interview for L'Equipe because he didn't want to let down the journalist, but he socially distanced and wore a mask except when his photograph was being taken, which he concedes was an error of judgment, and he should have rescheduled. He goes on to say the travel declaration was submitted on my behalf, and my agent sincerely apologises for the administrative mistake in ticking the incorrect box about previous travel before coming to Australia. All right, let me explain this. The two things he's done wrong. Number one, his form said he hadn't travelled, and he had. And the second one, even more important, is with a positive PCR test, he went, knowing he had COVID, he went and did an interview with L'Equipe and was out and about. This guy, Carol, I mean, words fail here.
Well, they don't fail me. I mean, this is arrogance in the extreme. The guy will have willfully infected people, and he's still trying to justify it in that statement. You know, he says he didn't want to let down a journalist. Oh, please, journalists get let down every day by people exactly like him. There's nothing to do with that. He just won't accept A, that he had COVID, and B, that it's dangerous. It's a typical anti-vaxxers attitude.
And he says
it's astonishing.
I mean, there's everything in there except an attendance at a Downing Street party, so I suppose we should be grateful for that. But Alistair, he says it was an error of judgment. Alistair, what do you think?
Well, he's also, the other connection to the Downing Street party is that he's trying to throw his agent under the bus. Yeah. Now, look, I'm sure that he probably doesn't fill in that many forms himself, but I think he knows that when he's travelling to somewhere like Australia for a tournament as important as the Australian Open, he needs to get his ducks in a row. I also thought there was one interesting line in there, and clearly that whole thing seems to have been written by a lawyer, but there's a bit in there where he does appear to accept that there is a risk from what he has done. And that's why I think with, Carol, it's interesting that you say he's a straightforward anti-vaxxer. I think he probably is, but he's kind of with his so-called defence, he's kind of trying to have it always at the moment. And I agree. I think that it's just an arrogance of thinking that because he's a famous tennis player. And then the other thing that has really got on my wick with this whole story is the way that he's tried, with a lot of help from people inside Serbia and Serbs in Australia, to try to whip this up into some kind of, anti-Serb thing. I just think that is, I find the whole thing, I just wish the whole story would go away, and it would go away best if he just accepted he's not going to play in the tournament.
Yeah, I mean, 95% of people probably don't have much interest in tennis, so they just think this guy is chancing himself, if I could put it like that. And the thing about... Sorry, Alistair, go on.
No, I think tennis is one of the most followed sports in the world, and I think that that's the reason why it's been getting such coverage around. This story's been huge right around the world, but I think this idea of him becoming some kind of poster boy. And seeing, Nigel Farage going on to sort of bow down before his family, I mean, which was a real big irony with Farage suddenly coming to the help of somebody who's being deported. So I really do think that Djokovic he's tried to have it always, and a bit like Boris Johnson, is finding that it doesn't always work. The
thing, blame the agent. The form says, have you travelled anywhere in the last 14 days before coming to Australia, right? He lives in Monaco. He went to two places. He went to Belgrade in Serbia, his home country. He then went to Spain as well. And we know all that because the guy tweets and Instagrams wherever he goes. So is blame the agent a good enough excuse? Have you ever done that?
Blame the agent?
Yeah, say
No. My agent's never filled out a form for me like that for travelling, ever. Just not that big of a deal. However, his agent knows that he travelled as well. If his agent is that involved in his affairs, his agent will absolutely have known that he travelled. So what he's done is picked an agent that's willing to lie on official papers to get him into a country illegally. So it was his choice to employ the agent, so I don't think blaming the agent washes, I'm afraid. I actually felt really sorry for Djokovic for a while. I felt like it might have been a bit of a witch hunt by the Australian government. Now it turns out that's maybe not the way.
I think the Australians are hopping mad, and there's been a recording of some TV anchors who I think look rather like we talked during the break. Someone recorded it, and they were being very, very rude and lying sneaking blank, 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 was the way they described him. And so there's clearly a lot of anger. And by the way, if you tick the wrong box, it could possibly be a criminal offence, and the guy's still in Australia. Maybe they ought to send a police car for him, Carol.
Well, do you know what? This is the reason Australians are so cross is that they've been in lockdown, since God was a lad. I think it's something like 220 days straight. They were in lockdown, and they're seeing this guy, willfully breaking the rules. I mean, Alistair touched on the fact that his whole family have got involved in making him out to be some kind of hero. His father actually had the brass neck to say he was being tortured by the Australian authorities. His wife, Helena, was begging for love and forgiveness. And I don't know who she was begging that for Djokovic or for the Australian people. But and the Serbian president even got involved and said something like, we're all behind him. Well, tough matey, you being behind him doesn't matter. Australia is what matters. And if you don't follow their rules, well, then you shouldn't be in the country. It really is as simple as that.